What I do want to talk about, though, is I'm no longer using the Arch repo version of OBS. Right now, I've actually swapped over to the Flatpak version. There's a very good reason why I've done that. I'm considering also swapping over to a version of OBS inside of the AUR. I just need to check out if it's actually doing everything I want it to do. So, for some reason, OBS is set up with a module system where when you compile the application, you can decide things like, hey, browser support in OBS, don't need it. Browser docs, don't need it. You can just not compile those in the application and skip out on that functionality. I guess it makes sense if you're never going to use that and you just don't want to compile it into the application. I guess that makes sense. The problem is when that's the way it's compiled inside of your distro's repos. So for some reason on Arch Linux, every single one of these optional modules is every single one of the optional modules is completely disabled. So you don't have access to things like the OBS browser. So having things like chat embedded into your stream. What else don't we have? We don't have things like browser docs, which is a new feature that was added fairly recently. I don't think... No, virtual camera actually was enabled, surprisingly. But there's a bunch of just little things that get added into OBS that aren't available. Like, all of these news articles kept coming out every time there was a big OBS update saying, look, OBS has this great new feature on Linux. And I just never saw that feature being there. And it's because of the way it's compiled on Arch. I could go and compile it myself. I'm very lazy, and I don't want to do that. So the Flatpak version was just the easiest way to do so. Now, the Flatpak version is giving me a couple of issues. I'll show you how it actually looks right now. I'm actually using one of the new features, the browser docs, which, no, I'll take a screenshot like this. There we go. And then we save the screenshot, and then we open it up in my browser. I could, set this up so I can actually load images in OBS, but fine. This will do it well enough. So basically, I've got my restream chat here as well. Obviously, this isn't very useful for what we're doing right now, but when I do a live stream, seeing this chat right here makes it much easier, because then I don't have to have like a separate window to do it, and always when I open up OBS, this will be here. So it's just really nice to have. I'm considering also putting my Streamlabs in there as well. This is just functionality OBS should have had for a really long time, because Streamlabs OBS has had it basically since the start. The main version of OBS always lags behind Streamlabs, but because Streamlabs isn't available on Linux, I just have to deal with it as it is. But anyway, I don't know what the deal is with the Arch package. I don't know why they would compile it with basically every one of the optional dependencies completely missing. All of this functionality is incredibly useful, and I've just wanted to be able to use it for so long. I didn't even realize until maybe a week ago that this was even a thing. I just thought there was some problem with the Arch package that made it missing, or maybe the Arch version was just out of date or something like that. But nope, it's just because the guys who maintain the OBS package on Arch, I don't know, don't care about things like having browser support. I've had to use a 8-year-old plugin that barely functions to be able to embed things like chat into my stream. Now I no longer need to do that. Now I can just do it natively inside of OBS. There is a package on the AUR, I believe. Let me see if I can find it. AUR OBS Studio Browser, I think it's called. Might be, that is what it's called. So this is a version of OBS that is compiled with, the functionality actually enabled. And I was having trouble compiling it the other day just because of the VLC Legit stuff and CEF Minimal as well, because when I tried to compile it, it was during the internet outage thing, and I didn't realize the internet outage was actually happening, and I just haven't gone back to actually try it. Because I managed to get it from the FlatHub working well enough, and I just haven't gone back to it. This version, on like the Flatpak version, generally is really good. I know some people like to complain about Flatpaks, like, oh, Flatpaks are bad, blah, 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 containerization, all this nonsense. But ultimately, it it's perfectly fine. Like, I don't have any issues with it besides one thing. There's one issue with it, and if I try to demonstrate it, I will have to restart the recording. And that is, I can't actually open up my file browser inside of OBS. So if I want to do something like change the background you're seeing on the recording here, I would actually have to go into the config file and modify it from there. If I try to modify it inside of OBS, every single time the application just freezes. When I use an image element that's already been made, it freezes. When I make a new image element, it freezes. It's not just with image elements. I don't think that's just the problem. I think for some reason it's not able to open up my file browser. I don't know why. Like, I would understand this being an issue over on the Wayland side, but under Xorg, there's no security to speak of, so it should be fine. Maybe the Flatpak for some reason is breaking the interaction. I tried to look up what the problem actually was, and I haven't been able to find anyone reporting the same issue. So I don't know if it's something localized to my system, or maybe there's something wrong with my install. I did try to reinstall it and see if that was going to fix it, but it didn't fix it. So I'm sort of just stuck right now. I'm going to try out this version in the AUR and see if that does it. If it doesn't, well, I'll just modify the config file manually when I have to. It's not a big deal. What I can do is duplicate an existing image and then modify the file name of, like, just modify the file name as I need to modify. That's going to work well enough. It's just a little bit annoying that I have to go and do that. But OBS on Linux has always been a bit of a mess. I know OBS is obviously much easier to use than the older solutions that exist and gives you far more power, much better than things like, directly using FFmpeg or using Simple Screen Recorder. I know there are people who use those, but if you want to actually have layouts working and things like that, doing it inside of OBS just makes stuff easier. I don't have to do any sort of weird editing in post to get things like this overlay working. I just record it in the overlay, and it's done. It massively simplifies the recording process, and, like, I can switch back, like this, for example. I can switch to the thing that shows the browser here and switch back, and there's just nothing that I have to go and edit. If I was doing that in post, I would be really lazy, and basically I would just show my browser on the screen the entire time. That would honestly be easier for me. Like, I just don't want to deal with that. So, even though OBS is a mess, and I would like it to improve, it is improving, and I'm going to complain about it no matter how good it gets anyway. I just want it to continue being better, and honestly, I would just like to have Streamlabs OBS on Linux. I feel like, have I talked about this on the podcast before? Streamlabs OBS. Okay, here's the problem with Streamlabs OBS. For some reason, it's an Electron application, but it isn't available on Linux. I think is it available on macOS? Apparently 3 years ago, according to this article from Linux Game Consortium, they're looking for someone to do Streamlabs OBS native development on Linux, which is, why do you don't need to do native development. It's a Electron application. Like, why? Just stop using Electron, good God. No, the fact that it's using Electron means that it should be available on Linux. What's up with the Elgato HD60, HD60S for Linux? Anyone have it working through OBS okay? Yeah, I wouldn't buy. The only Elgato thing that I own, and the only thing I actually recommend them, is the Elgato Cam Link. From what I've seen, if you want to do, like, console capture or capturing another PC, it's easier to get yourself a, I've got a, can you hear that? No. I've got a AverMedia, what is the name? AverMedia Live Gamer Portable 2 Plus. Horrible name. But it is a very good piece of tech. And just works. Just magically works. You plug it in, it just works. Elgato HD60, I'm pretty sure it actually requires the Elgato drivers to function. The Cam Link, on the other hand, it basically just acts as a webcam. How can I use Twitch integration on Linux? You can just embed the link. Yeah, I've looked at this before, and Like, even though it's built with, like, it's literally built with Electron, it's just not available on the Linux side. There's just no reason why that should be the case. Why would you build something with Electron and then not make it available on Linux? It doesn't make sense, but it's so useful. I can't. One day, maybe we'll have support for it. I would like that day. Or if someone decides to, maybe fork the application and keep it feature parity, but make sure it actually functions on Linux, that would be nice. I don't have the expertise to do that. Otherwise, honestly, I would do it if I had that expertise. Yeah. So, honestly, maybe it's something worth looking into. But we're getting to the point now where the regular version of OBS is good enough that it's functional. So, maybe it's not that big of a deal anymore. I do think Streamlabs OBS looks better, but how it looks isn't that big of a deal. As long as it's functional, that's ultimately really all we need.